The Galactic Council had been watching Earth for nearly 70 years before they decided to make contact. Their observation stations had picked up the first radio signals from that small blue planet decades ago. And since then, they had studied humanity with growing concern. The 12 elder species who governed the known galaxy had seen many civilizations rise and fall. But none quite like the humans. The Velnoxer were the oldest and wisest among the Council species. They had traveled the stars when most other races were still learning to make fire. Their ambassador, a female named Kethra, had spent 300 years in diplomatic service. She had negotiated peace treaties between warring empires. She had welcomed dozens of new species into the galactic community. She had seen things that would drive lesser beings mad. But nothing had prepared her for humanity. The Council had classified Earth as a type for aggressive civilization, which meant they were considered dangerous but containable. The classification was based on simple observation. Humans fought constantly. They did not just fight other species, which would have been understandable. They fought each other. Their entire history was written in blood and fire. Their entertainment celebrated violence. Their technology seemed designed primarily for destruction. Every time the observation teams thought humans might be evolving toward peace, another war would break out somewhere on their planet. Kethra had drawn the assignment to make first contact. Some of her colleagues called it an honor. Others called it a death sentence. She preferred to think of it as a challenge. Her shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere on a cool autumn morning. The landing coordinates had been agreed upon months in advance through careful manipulation of human communication networks. The Council had planted the idea of a meeting location in the minds of several key human leaders, letting them believe it was their own choice. Geneva had been selected because it was considered neutral ground among the various human factions. The shuttle touched down on a grassy field surrounded by mountains. Kethra took a moment to study the landscape through her viewport. It was beautiful in a primitive sort of way. Green vegetation covered the slopes. A lake glittered in the distance. Small, flying creatures moved through the air. She could understand why humans fought so hard for this world. It was a paradise compared to many planets she had visited. The human delegation was already waiting when she stepped out of the shuttle. There were 12 of them, representing the major power structures of their world. Security personnel stood at a respectful distance, their weapons clearly visible, but not raised. Kethra noted this with approval. It showed both strength and restraint. The leader of the delegation stepped forward. She was a female human, shorter than Kethra had expected, with hair that had turned gray with age. Her eyes were calm and steady, missing nothing. She moved with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime in positions of authority. "Ambassador Kethra," the woman said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "I am Lucy Grant, appointed representative of Earth. Welcome to our world. We have been expecting you for quite some time." Kethra's translator implant worked overtime trying to decode the layers of meaning in those simple words. She reached out and took the offered hand, mimicking the gesture she had studied in preparation for this moment.
Hey.
"You knew we were watching?" Kethra asked. Lucy smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Kethra's secondary hearts beat faster. "We suspected. Your observation satellites are very advanced, but they still create small gravitational distortions. Our scientists detected them about 15 years ago. We have been preparing for this meeting ever since." This was not in any of the briefing documents. The Council had believed their observation was completely undetected. Kethra filed this information away for her report and moved on. "Shall we begin the formal proceedings?" she asked. Lucy nodded and gestured toward a large building in the distance. "We have prepared a conference room. I hope you will find it comfortable." The walk to the building gave Kethra time to observe more of her surroundings. Humans lined the paths, kept back by security barriers. Some held signs with messages her translator could not fully interpret. Some cheered. Some looked afraid. A few looked angry. It was a typical reaction to first contact, she supposed. Every species responded to the unknown with a mixture of emotions. The conference room was spacious and well lit. A long table dominated the center, with chairs arranged on both sides. Refreshments had been provided, though Kethra politely declined. She had no idea if human food was compatible with her biology. Lucy took a seat across from her. The other human representatives arranged themselves along the table. Kethra noted their positions and body language. The military officers sat together, their postures rigid. The political leaders clustered in another group, their expressions carefully neutral. The scientists hung back, observing everything with hungry eyes. The Galactic Council extends its formal greetings to humanity, Kethra began, reciting the words she had spoken to dozens of new species. You have been observed and studied. You have been found worthy of contact. We offer you provisional membership in the galactic community with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. She went on to explain the terms. Humanity would be assigned a protected sector of space for their expansion. They would be given access to basic technologies that would accelerate their development. They would be expected to follow the laws and customs of the galactic community. Most importantly, it would be forbidden from developing weapons beyond a certain technological threshold. Lucy listened to everything without interruption. She asked clarifying questions at appropriate moments. She took careful notes on a small electronic device. Her expression remained pleasant but unreadable throughout. When Kethra finished outlining the terms, Lucy set down her device and folded her hands on the table. I understand, Lucy said. These terms are very generous, and humanity is grateful for the opportunity. However, I must ask a question before we proceed. Of course, Kethra replied, what happens if we decline these terms? The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Kethra felt the attention of every being in the room focus on her. In 300 years of diplomatic service, no species had ever asked that question. Every civilization she had contacted had been eager to join the galactic community. The benefits were too great to refuse. The alternative was too terrible to consider. No species has ever declined, Kethra said carefully. Lucy nodded, her expression unchanged. That was not my question, Ambassador. I asked what would happen if we did decline. Kethra took a moment to compose her response. Then the Council would be forced to implement containment protocols. Your species would be restricted to your home system. Any attempt to expand beyond those boundaries would be met with appropriate force. I see, Lucy said. She looked at the other members of her delegation, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then she turned back to Kethra. Ambassador, I think there may be some misunderstandings about humanity that we should clear up before any decisions are made. Would you be willing to stay a few days and learn more about us? I believe it would benefit both our peoples. Every instinct Kethra had developed over 3 centuries told her to refuse. Her mission was simple: deliver the terms, secure acceptance, and return to report. Extended contact with a Type 4 species was dangerous and unnecessary, but something in Lucy's eyes made her hesitate. There was no fear there, no desperation, only a calm certainty that Kethra found deeply unsettling. Very well. Well, I will stay and learn. Lucy's smile widened just slightly. Excellent. I promise you, Ambassador, it will be an education you will never forget. As she was led to her quarters that evening, Kethra could not shake the feeling that something important had just shifted. The humans were not behaving like any other species she had encountered. They were not grateful, or afraid, or awed. They were treating this first contact as a negotiation between equals, and for the first time in her long career. Kethra wondered if they might be right to do so. The education of Ambassador Kethra began the following morning. Lucy Grant arrived at her quarters just as the sun was rising over the mountains. She brought with her a small team of assistants and a vehicle that would take them to their first destination. Where are we going? Kethra asked as she climbed into the transport. To meet some people who can explain humanity better than I ever could, Lucy replied. Politicians like me are good at talking, but there are some things that need to be shown rather than told. They traveled for several hours across the human landscape. Kethra watched through the windows as cities gave way to farmland, and farmland gave way to desert. The planet was more diverse than she had expected. Different regions had entirely different climates and ecosystems. She began to understand why humans had developed so many different cultures. Geography had forced them to adapt in countless different ways. The vehicle finally stopped at a military installation in the middle of a vast desert. High fences surrounded the complex. Armed guards stood at every entrance. Signs warned of restricted areas and authorized personnel only. This was clearly a place where humans kept their secrets. A man was waiting for them at the main gate. He was tall and broad with dark skin and a shaved head. His posture was rigid, and his movements were precise. Everything about him suggested military training and combat experience. He wore a simple uniform with minimal decorations. But Kethra could see from the way others looked at him that he commanded great respect. "Ambassador Kethra," Lucy said. "This is Colonel Danny Webb. He has been authorized by our government to share certain classified information with you." Danny extended his hand and Kethra shook it. His grip was firm, perhaps a little too firm. She suspected it was intentional. "Ambassador," Danny said, his voice deep and steady. "Welcome to our facility. I understand you want to learn about humanity. Well, this is where we keep the things most humans prefer not to think about." He led them through several security checkpoints and down into an underground complex. The walls were thick concrete reinforced with metal. The lighting was harsh and artificial. There were no windows anywhere. This was a bunker designed to survive catastrophic destruction. They entered a large briefing room, filled with screens and holographic displays. Danny gestured for Kethra to take a seat, then moved to stand before the main display. "Ambassador," he began, "my government has authorized me to share some of our most closely guarded secrets with you. We believe it is important that the Galactic Council understands exactly what they are dealing with before making any decisions about humanity's future." The main display activated, showing a map of Earth. Thousands of red dots covered the surface, concentrated in certain regions but spread across the entire planet. "These are our nuclear weapons," Danny explained. "Each dot represents a warhead capable of destroying an entire city. In total, we have enough firepower to render our own planet uninhabitable several times over. We have had this capability for nearly 80 years. Kethra stared at the display. Her skin had turned a pale shade of green, a sign of deep distress among her species. "You have weapons that could destroy your own world, and you have not used them against each other?" "We came close," Danny said. "Several times we stood on the edge of total annihilation. But we always pulled back at the last moment. That shows remarkable restraint for a species classified as Type 4 aggressive." Danny smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Ambassador, that restraint is not because we are peaceful. It is because we understand consequences. When humans truly go to war, we do not fight to win battles or capture territory. We fight to eliminate threats permanently." Lucy stepped forward to stand beside the colonel. "What Danny is trying to explain is that humanity has a very different philosophy when it comes to conflict. We have studied the records your council keeps about galactic warfare. The other species seem to practice what we would call limited warfare. They fight until one side achieves its objectives or until the cost becomes too great. Then they negotiate, sign treaties, exchange territories, and move on." "That is correct," Kethra said. "It is the civilized way to resolve disputes." "Humans do not do this," Danny said. "When we commit fully to a conflict, we pursue what we call total war. Every resource is mobilized. Every citizen becomes a combatant in some form. Every aspect of society is directed toward a single goal. And we do not stop until our enemy is completely destroyed or has surrendered without any conditions." The display changed, showing historical footage. Kethra watched as cities were reduced to rubble by massive bombing campaigns. She saw factories dismantled and populations relocated. She saw armies surrender by the hundreds of thousands. The scale of destruction was staggering, but what struck her most was the cold efficiency of it all. There was no rage or passion in these images. Just systematic, methodical elimination of anything that posed a threat. This is how we ended our last major conflict, Lucy said quietly. We did not just defeat our enemies. We made it physically impossible for them to ever threaten us again. We destroyed their ability to wage war. Then we rebuilt their nations from the ground up and turned them into our closest allies. Danny pointed to several locations on the map. These countries were our most bitter enemies less than a century ago. Today, they are some of our strongest friends. We did not achieve this through kindness or diplomacy alone. We achieved it by first demonstrating that opposing us meant total destruction, and then by showing that cooperation meant prosperity. Kethra's mind raced through the implications. The Council's containment protocols would attempt to restrict your species to this system. They would fail, Danny said flatly. Perhaps not immediately. Perhaps not for decades. But eventually they would fail. Humans are very patient when we need to be, and we are very good at finding weaknesses in any system. The Council would try to contain us, and we would spend however long it took to break free, and then, Lucy answered this time, and then you would not be dealing with a contained humanity that wants to join your community. You would be dealing with an angry humanity that sees you as the enemy. I do not think anyone wants that. Danny deactivated the display and turned to face Kethra directly. Ambassador, I am not telling you these things to frighten you or to make threats. I am telling you because you need to understand what humanity is. We are not mindless aggressors who attack without reason. We actually prefer peace. War is expensive and destructive, and we would rather spend our resources on building things than destroying them. But when we are threatened, Lucy added, we respond with everything we have. There is no middle ground. There is no limited engagement. There is only total commitment until the threat no longer exists. Kethra sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything she had seen and heard. Her entire understanding of humanity was shifting. The Council had classified them as dangerous primitives who needed to be controlled for their own good. But what she was seeing was something far more complex. These were not mindless brutes. They were calculating strategists who had simply developed a different approach to survival. Why are you showing me this? She finally asked. You must know that this information could convince the Council to implement containment immediately. Before you become too powerful to stop, Lucy sat down across from her. Because we have also studied your Council, Ambassador. We know that containment has never worked against a species that truly wanted to break free. We know that the Velnoxi rose to power by eliminating their competitors rather than containing them. We know that the only species that have survived long-term in your galactic community are those that prove themselves too dangerous to destroy. She leaned forward. Her eyes locked on Kethra's. We are showing you our teeth, Ambassador, so that you understand what you are dealing with. But we are also showing you that our teeth stay hidden unless someone tries to hurt us. Humanity wants to be part of your community. We want to trade and explore and learn. We want allies, not enemies. But we will not accept chains, and we will not bow to threats. Kethra rose from her seat slowly. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to stand tall. I need to report this to the Council. They will want to debate the implications. Of course, Lucy said. Take all the time you need. But remember what you have learned here today. Humanity is not asking for permission to exist. We are offering partnership. The choice of how to respond is yours. As Kethra was escorted back to the surface, she knew that her report would change everything. The Council had never faced anything like humanity before, and she honestly had no idea how they would react, Ambassador. Kethra's report reached the Galactic Council. Within hours of her departure from Earth, the reaction was immediate and intense. Within a single day, emergency summons were sent to every elder species, calling them to the Grand Chamber of Unity for an unprecedented gathering. The Grand Chamber is a massive orbital station, positioned at the exact mathematical center of known space. It had been built millennia ago. It's neutral ground where the elder species could meet and make decisions that affected the entire galaxy. The chamber itself was enormous, designed to accommodate beings of every size and shape. Atmospheric controls kept different sections at different temperatures and pressures too. They suit the needs of various species. For 3 days, the 12 elder species debated what to do about humanity. The arguments grew heated. Alliances that had stood for centuries began to crack under the pressure. Everyone had an opinion, and none of them seemed to agree. High Counselor Vex of the Dromathy was the first to speak formally. The Dromathy were towering insectoids, nearly 3 meters tall with armored exoskeletons and razor-sharp limbs. They had built their empire through military conquest and still maintained the largest fleet in known space. Vex stood at the center of the chamber, his compound eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. "These humans are clearly bluffing," Vex declared. His voice amplified to reach every corner of the vast space. "They are primitives who have barely left their own world. They do not have faster-than-light travel. They do not have energy shields or plasma weapons. What could they possibly do against the combined might of the Council? I recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. Full containment and technological suppression. We crush them now before they become a real threat." Murmurs of agreement rippled through certain sections of the chamber. The Dromathy had many allies among the younger species who owed their positions to military support, but then Counselor Myra of the Synthra flickered into visibility. The Synthra had transcended physical form thousands of years ago. They existed as pure energy, able to take any shape they chose. Myra appeared as a column of blue light that pulsed with each word. "You have not studied the ambassador's report carefully enough," Myra said. "The humans' technology is not the threat. Their psychology is. They think differently than any species we have ever encountered. High Counselor Vex speaks of crushing them, but has he considered what would happen if we tried and failed?" "We would not fail," Vex insisted. "Can you guarantee that? Can you promise that not a single human would escape? That they would not hide and rebuild and remember? Because according to Ambassador Kethra's report, that is exactly what they would do. And when they emerged again, they would not come seeking membership. They would come seeking revenge." The chamber fell silent. Everyone present knew the history of the Velnoxy rise to power. They had faced enemies who underestimated them. Those enemies no longer existed. Kethra rose from her seat to address the assembly. She had been dreading this moment, but she knew her testimony was crucial. "Honored counselors," she began, "I have served as a diplomat for 300 years. I have welcomed dozens of species into our community. I believed I understood the patterns of civilizational development. But humanity does not fit those patterns." She activated a holographic display showing data from her observations. "Every species in this council practices what humans call limited warfare. We fight until one side achieves its objectives, or until the cost becomes too great. Then we negotiate. Treaties are signed. Territories are exchanged. Life continues. This is how civilized beings resolve disputes." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Humans do not do this. When humans commit fully to a conflict, they pursue what they call total war. Every resource is mobilized. Every citizen becomes a combatant. And they do not stop until their enemy is completely destroyed or has surrendered unconditionally. There is no negotiation. There is no compromise. There is only victory or death." Counselor Narration of the Kalari raised a tentacle. The Kalari were an aquatic species known for their philosophical nature and long memories. They had survived longer than most by avoiding direct conflict whenever possible. "Surely this is an exaggeration," Rachin said, his translator rendering his underwater speech into audible words. "No species could sustain such levels of violence for extended periods. The social and economic costs would be devastating." "You are correct," Kethra agreed. "They cannot sustain it. That is precisely the point. Humans burn so bright in war that their conflicts rarely last long by galactic standards. But in that brief time, they accomplish what would take other species centuries. They completely reshape the political landscape and eliminate any possibility of future threats from the same source." She showed footage from human history. Wars that had engulfed entire continents. Cities reduced to ash. Populations displaced by the millions. But then she showed what came after. The rebuilding. The reconciliation. Former enemies becoming close allies within a single generation. Humans do not conquer, Kethra explained. They eliminate threats and then rebuild. The nations they've defeated in their last major war are now among their strongest partners. This is not the behavior of mindless aggressors. This is the behavior of a species that has learned to turn enemies into friends through overwhelming force followed by genuine cooperation. High Arbiter Solas of the Velnoxy had remained silent throughout the debate. He was the oldest being in the chamber, having lived for nearly 8,000 years. His species had founded the council and still held ultimate authority over its decisions. When he finally spoke, everyone listened. Ambassador Kethrasola said, his voice ancient and heavy with wisdom, "You have spent time among these humans. You have seen their capabilities and heard their words. Setting aside all data and analysis, what does your instinct tell you? Are they truly as dangerous as they claim?" Kethra considered the question carefully. She thought about Lucy Grant's calm confidence. She thought about Colonel Danny Webb's cold description of total war. She thought about the thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other across a single small planet.
"Yes," she finally said.
"I believe they are exactly as dangerous as they claim. Perhaps more so. They showed me their weapons and their history not to intimidate, but to inform. They wanted us to understand what we would be facing if we chose conflict. And I believe that if we choose that path, we will regret it." "Then what do you recommend?" Solas asked. Kethra took a deep breath. What she was about to suggest had never been done before. It went against every protocol and tradition the Council had developed over millennia. "I recommend that we do something unprecedented," she said. "I recommend that we treat humanity as equals, not as primitives to be guided, not as threats to be contained, but as partners who have something valuable to offer our community." The chamber erupted. Councillor Vex roared his disapproval. Other voices joined in, some agreeing and some objecting. The noise was overwhelming, but High Arbiter Solas raised one withered hand and slowly, the chamber fell silent.
"The ambassador's recommendation is noted," he said.
"We will continue deliberations tomorrow. But I want every counselor to consider one thing before we meet again. The humans did not ask us to make this choice. They simply presented the facts and waited. That patience, that confidence, tells me more about their species than any amount of data ever could." As the chamber emptied, Kethra remained in her seat, exhausted but strangely hopeful. She had done what she could. Now, it was up to the council to decide the fate of two civilizations. She did not know that fate was about to force their hand in a way none of them expected. The Galactic Council's debate was interrupted. On the fourth day, by something no one had expected. An emergency signal arrived from the outer territories, carrying news that made every counselor forget their arguments about humanity. The Voroth collective had returned. The Voroth were a nightmare from the ancient past. They had been expelled from the galactic community over 2,000 years ago for crimes so terrible that most records had been sealed. They were not just conquerors. They were consumers. Their species fed on the neural energy of other sentient beings, and they bred in numbers that defied comprehension. A single Voroth hive could produce billions of drones within a decade. When they had first appeared, the Council had fought a war that lasted 3 centuries. Entire species had been wiped from existence. Stars had been destroyed to deny the Vorath resources. In the end, the combined might of all galactic civilizations had managed to push the Voroth back into the dark space between galaxies, where they were supposed to remain forever. But now they had returned. Their massive hive fleet had emerged from the void and was currently devouring its way through the outer colonies of the Kaleri. Billions of beings had already been consumed. More were dying every hour. High Counselor Vex stood in the command center of the Grand Chamber, watching the tactical display with growing horror. Red markers showed the advancing Voroth swarm. Blue markers showed the Council defense fleets. The red was spreading much faster than the blue could respond. "Current consumption rates," Vex announced, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "The Vorath will reach core space within 2 standard cycles. Our defense fleets are mobilizing, but they were designed for police actions and deterrence, not extinction-level combat. We have not fought a real war in generations." The other counselors watched in stunned silence. They had grown comfortable in their long peace. Their militaries had become ceremonial forces, good for parades and minor disputes, but utterly unprepared for what was coming, it was. Ambassador Kithra, who spoke the words that everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say.
Perhaps?
We should ask the humans for help. This suggestion was met with shocked silence. Then Counselor Vex made a sound that his translator rendered as bitter laughter. The humans? They are not even full members of our community. They do not have faster-than-light travel. Their weapons are primitive by our standards. What could they possibly contribute to this fight? We could give them the technology, Kethra said. Share our faster-than-light drives and our weapon systems. Let them join the battle. That would take months of training. We do not have months, and we provide the ships and let them fly. Humans learn quickly. They have been preparing for war their entire existence. It is what they do. High Arbiter Solus raised his hand for silence. The ancient Velnoxi studied the tactical display for a long moment before speaking. Contact the humans, he said. Offer them whatever technology they need. Ask if they are willing to help defend beings they have never met against an enemy they have never faced. The message was sent. The response came within hours. Humanity would help. They asked only one thing in return. They wanted to handle the situation their way, without interference from council commanders. 3 weeks later, a human fleet of 17 vessels dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Kalari territory. They were small ships by galactic standards. Cargo transports and patrol vessels that had been hastily retrofitted with borrowed technology. Their hulls still showed the marks of rushed construction. Their weapons were a strange mixture of human ballistics and council energy systems. The fleet commander was Admiral Nick Patterson, a man who had served in 3 wars on Earth and had never lost a battle. He was 60 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by anything. His first transmission to the Council Observation Fleet was brief. This is Admiral Patterson of the Earth Defense Force. We are here to help. Stay out of our way. Counselor Vex watched from his command ship as the human vessels moved into the battle space. He expected them to form defensive lines or establish protected positions. Instead, they scattered, moving in seemingly random patterns through the vast area of space. What are they doing? Vex demanded. They appear to be fleeing from every engagement. Ambassador Kethra had requested permission to observe from the Council flagship. She studied the tactical display with growing understanding. They are not fleeing, she said slowly. They're hunting. Hunting what? At the Voroth are everywhere. Watch their patterns. Every movement is probing the Vorath response. They are testing communication delays. It's mapping reaction times. Looking for something. It took another day before the humans found what they were looking for. Vora's swarm was not a unified force. It was a colonial organism, controlled by queen ships hidden deep within the mass of drones. The queens coordinated all Vorath activity through a complex network of neural signals. Without them, the drones were mindless creatures that could barely function. The Council had known about the queens for centuries. They had tried to target them in the ancient war, but had never been able to locate them precisely within the swarm. The Voroth were too good at hiding their leaders, but the humans had found them. Every random probe, every apparent retreat. It's actually been a carefully designed experiment to map the Vorath communication network. They had traced signals back through layers of drone activity until they identified 17 distinct queen ships scattered throughout the swarm. On the 4th day of human involvement, Admiral Patterson gave the order to attack. 17 human ships moved simultaneously, each one targeting a different queen. They did not try to fight their way through the swarm using conventional weapons. Instead, they accelerated to maximum speed and plunged directly into the massive Voroth drones. Taking damage, but never stopping. Each ship carried a special payload, something humanity had developed during their own wars. It was a biological agent designed to attack neural networks, a rapidly mutating compound that could adapt to any organic brain structure. The humans had created it as a weapon against each other and then banned its use because it was too horrible. Now they unleashed it against the Vorath queens. The effect was immediate and devastating. One by one, the queen ships began to die. Their neural networks collapsed under the assault of the human weapon. And as each queen died, the millions of drones under her control simply stopped functioning. They did not retreat or scatter. They just stopped, hanging motionless in space like dead insects. Within 6 hours, the entire Vorath swarm had collapsed. Billions of drones drifted lifelessly through the void. The threat that the Council had feared for 2,000 years had been eliminated in less than a week. Admiral Patterson's final transmission to the Council fleet was as brief as his first. Threat eliminated. You are welcome. High Counselor Vex stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His best analysts were still trying to understand what had happened. How had the humans accomplished in days what the Council had failed to do in centuries? Ambassador Kethra provided the answer. They did not fight the Vorath the way we would have, she explained. They did not try to match strength against strength or wear down the swarm through attrition. They identified the critical weakness and struck at it directly with everything they had. No warning, no negotiation, no mercy.
Ow!
She turned to face the High Counselor. This is what I was trying to explain. Humans do not fight wars. They eliminate enemies. And now the Council must decide what to do with a species that has just saved us all. Vex had no response. For the first time in his long life, he understood what it meant to be truly afraid of another species. Not because they were evil or aggressive, but because they were simply better at the one thing that ultimately determined survival. The humans were coming to the Council chamber. Everything was about to change. The Grand Chamber of Unity had never been so crowded. Representatives from every species in known space had traveled to witness this moment. They filled every seat and standing area. They watched from observation decks and through remote viewing systems. The entire galaxy was holding its breath. Humanity was about to receive its formal response from the Galactic Council. Lucy Grant stood at the center of the chamber, exactly where countless ambassadors had stood before her. But she was not like those other ambassadors. She did not wear the ceremonial robes that tradition demanded. Instead, she wore a simple dark suit, the same kind she had worn during her years as a diplomat on Earth. Admiral Nick Patterson stood. At her right side, his uniform still showing the marks of recent battle. A small honor guard of human soldiers flanked them, their faces calm and their postures relaxed. The 12 elder species sat in their elevated positions around the chamber. High Arbiter Solas of the Velnoxy occupied the central throne, his ancient body supported by medical devices that kept him alive long past his natural years. To his left sat High Counselor Vex of the Dramathy, his compound eyes fixed on the humans with an expression that mixed respect and fear. To his right floated Counselor Myra of the Synthera, her energy form flickering with colors that no translator could interpret. Solas raised one withered hand, and the chamber fell into absolute silence. Humanity, the High Arbiter began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. You have presented this council with a unique challenge. Spanning thousands of years and countless species, we have never encountered beings quite like you. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the assembly. You are simultaneously the most violent and most restrained beings we have ever studied. You possess the capacity for terrible destruction that rivals our most advanced civilizations. Yet you consistently choose to build rather than destroy. You create weapons that could end worlds, then lock them away and hope never to use them. You terrify us with your potential, and yet when we needed help, you came without hesitation. Lucy remained perfectly still, her expression calm and attentive. The Vorath Collective was a nightmare that haunted this council for 2,000 years, Solas continued. We fought them to a standstill at tremendous cost. We pushed them into the void and prayed they would never return. When they did return, we were paralyzed by fear and indecision. Our fleets were unprepared. Our strategies were outdated. We faced extinction. He turned his gaze directly to Admiral Patterson, and then you came. 17 ships. Technology you had possessed for less than a month. And in 4 days, you accomplished what we could not achieve in 3 centuries of war. You did not just defeat the Vorath, you eliminated them completely. The threat that defined our civilization for millennia is now nothing more than dead matter drifting in space. Admiral Patterson nodded slightly but said nothing. His face revealed no pride or satisfaction. He had simply done his job. The Council has debated for many days how to respond to this situation, Solus said. Some argued that you are too dangerous to be allowed freedom among the stars. They feared what you might do if you ever turned your abilities against us. Others argued that your very nature makes containment impossible. Any attempt to restrict you would eventually fail, and then we would face your anger rather than your friendship. He paused again, and when he spoke next, his voice carried something that might have been wonder. But in the end, we reached a different conclusion. You came to help us not for territory, or tribute, or political advantage. You did not demand payment or concessions. You asked only for the chance to handle the situation in your own way. And when it was done, you asked for nothing in return, except acknowledgement. The main display screens around the chamber activated, showing a new map of known space. Where before there had been 12 sectors, one for each elder species, there were now 13. The 13th sector was positioned at the edge of the galaxy, bordering the dark void from which the Vorath had emerged. We offer humanity, not provisional membership in the galactic community, Solus announced. We offer full status as an elder species of the Galactic Council. Your sector will border the dark space. You will be our guardians against whatever else might lurk in the void between galaxies. This is the highest honor we can bestow, and it has never been granted so quickly to any species before. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Species waited millennia for elder status. They proved themselves through countless generations of contribution to galactic civilization. Humanity had achieved it in weeks. Lucy finally spoke. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. The people of Earth are honored by this offer, High Arbiter. We accept the responsibility you have placed upon us. We will guard the dark spaces and protect the Council from external threats. She paused, and something in her expression sharpened. But I want to make certain things clear, so there are no misunderstandings in the future. If threats emerge from within Council space, we will respond if called upon. However, we will expect to handle such situations in our own way, just as we handled the Vorath. That is acceptable, Solus said. But you must agree to certain rules of engagement. We cannot have you eliminating species over minor disputes or misunderstandings. A small smile crossed Lucy's face. I think we can agree to that. Humans generally prefer to solve problems peacefully when possible. War is expensive and destructive. We would rather spend our resources on building things and exploring new frontiers. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. But you should understand something about us, High Arbiter. Something important. We do not make threats. We do not posture or bluff or engage in shows of force. If we ever move against someone, it will be without warning. It will be without mercy. And it will be without the possibility of surrender until we have achieved our objectives. The chamber was utterly silent. That is not a threat, Lucy continued. It is simply information. I want everyone here to understand the stakes clearly. As long as no one threatens humanity or those under our protection, you will find us to be generous friends and reliable partners. We will share our knowledge and our resources. We will trade fairly and help those in need. We will be the allies you always hoped to find. She let those words hang in the air for a moment. But if anyone in this chamber is considering future aggression against humanity or our friends, I want you to remember what happened to the Vorath. Remember that we did that with borrowed technology we barely understood? Remember that we have been building weapons and fighting wars since before your ancestors crawled from the oceans of their homeworlds. Then imagine what we will be capable of in 100 years. In 1,000, Admiral Patterson allowed himself a thin smile. The message had been delivered perfectly. High Arbiter. Solus inclined his head slowly. We understand each other perfectly, Ambassador Grant. Welcome to the Galactic Council. May this partnership benefit all our peoples for generations to come. The chamber erupted in a mixture of applause and nervous conversation. Some species celebrated the arrival of powerful new allies. Others whispered fearfully about what the future might hold. but everyone understood that the galaxy had changed forever. As the formal ceremony concluded, Ambassador Kethra made her way through the crowd to Lucy's side. "That was quite a speech," the Velnoxy said. "Do you truly believe your people are as dangerous as you described?" Lucy watched the swirling crowd of aliens, her expression thoughtful. "Ambassador, before I took this job, I was a history professor. I spent my entire life studying what humanity is capable of. The beautiful things we have created, the terrible things we have done to each other." She turned to face Kethra directly. "The truth is, I undersold us in there. If I had told them what we are really capable of when we feel threatened, they would have tried to destroy us immediately. They would have failed, but they would have tried. And then instead of standing here as friends, we would be standing over the ruins of their civilization." Kethra felt a deep chill run through her body. "And then, what would have happened?" Lucy shrugged. "And then we would have one. We always do, eventually. It is not something we are proud of, but it is who we are. The Council made the right choice today. Partnership is much better for everyone than the alternative." She extended her hand, and after a moment, Kethra took it. "So," Lucy said, her smile warm and genuine, "shall we go discuss the future? I have some ideas about trade agreements and scientific exchanges that I think you will find very interesting. Humanity has a lot to offer, and we are eager to learn from all of you as well." As they walked together through the grand chamber, surrounded by beings from 1,000 different worlds, Kethra reflected on everything that had happened. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not as conquerors seeking empire or supplicants begging for scraps. They had arrived as something far more significant. They had arrived as equals who knew exactly what they were worth and would accept nothing less. The galaxy would never be the same. And looking at the confident human walking beside her, Kethra suspected that was probably a good thing. The stars themselves seemed brighter somehow, as if the universe itself was welcoming its newest children to take their place among the ancient powers. Humanity had arrived, and they were here to stay.